Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television, and we're broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria. Today on the program, our conversation has been on the planned sale of Mainstreet Bank Limited by the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria. Of course, it's been generating a lot of issues, and today on the program, I have with me the Managing Director, CEO of the Asset Management Company of Nigeria, Mr. Mustapha Chike Obi, who has been having a conversation with me and looking at some of the issues, and of course the legal aspect of it. We've also been looking at with business lawyer and former chairman section on business law of the NBA, Mr. George Etomi. But I still have here with me in the studio Mr. Mustapha Chike Obi. Mr. Chike Obi, thank you so much for sticking around. Now, just before we went on that program, of course, we listened to Mr. Etomi, and basically he gave the legal aspect and corroborated most of what you already actually said. But looking at where we are, I remember that once upon a time, AMCON had plans to actually list these nationalized banks on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Why did AMCON change its mind? Perhaps that would have been a better option than going ahead, at least for Mainstreet Bank right now, than to sell it.
It was heavily considered. And I must point out, again, we have bosses, the Ministry of Finance, CBN, and the Presidency. Also, National Assembly is very interested in what we do. So the discussion about going to the capital market and having some of these shares available to the Nigerian public was heavily considered and very, very heavily suggested, particularly by the CMA, who is very interested in broad ownership of these banks. But there are some practical problems with it. The first problem is that AMCON has a significant bond redemption in October of this year, which must be met. And part of meeting that bond redemption this is one of the sources of raising funds to meet that bond redemption. So that's one practical problem. The second is that to list a company in the stock exchange, the capital market, is a very, very difficult process. One of the things you need is, I think, 3 to 5 years of operating records, which these banks don't have. And so we had a compromise that we will go ahead, but we'll encourage the buyers to list these companies as soon as possible. So part of our process, part of our selection process is those buyers who agree that they will list these companies in a reasonable time is part of our criteria for choosing the eventual winner. So yes, we're very conscious that it's good for Nigerian public to own this. But we also have other issues that are practical. We don't want to wait 5 years before we go to the capital market, because that will affect our funding model, and that will also affect the fact that we really don't want to be running companies, as Mr. Etomi said. That's not what we're here for. And if we did that, we'll be saddled, we will be diverted from our main purpose, which is to the rescue of the financial system, be part of the rescue, because there's other parts of the rescue. And also to assist as much as we can in keeping the economy vibrant. And once we've done that, we really shouldn't be owning companies and running companies, because that would distract us from that mandate. So
apart from being part of the criteria that they have to list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange when eventually they do take over this bank, what other criteria can you tell us that these investors who are taking over this bank must have?
Well, let me tell you, there's two. We're not a regulator at AMCON. So we'll tell you what AMCON is looking for. But then Central Bank of Nigeria looks for different things. And I do not want to prejudge Central Bank's criteria.
But then you're also going to have to advise the Central Bank eventually.
No, we're not. We don't advise them. We
inform
them, we give them a list of the 1, 2, 3, or 4 people that we think we have shortlisted based on our criteria. And then the CBN will do what it does, which they don't tell us, and we just tell them who we're thinking. And if they reject all 4, then we'll go to the next. What we're looking for is the maximization of the price AMCON gets and the minimization of disruption in financial markets. What I mean is we will take a lower price if the buyer does not lay off a lot of employees, does not have a predatory mentality to the banks. We want people who will keep running these banks and keep employing Nigerians. And for that, we might take a lesser price. So we do want the highest possible price. We also want the minimum disruption to the Nigerian economic system. So we balance those two things. And we'll end up with 2, 3, or 4 names, which we will send to CBN. And then CBN will do what it does and then come back and say, these 4 are acceptable, or two of them are acceptable, or none of them is acceptable. But that's a regulatory matter which we have nothing to do with.
Now, going forward, let's just end that conversation because I have other questions I'd like to ask you. Going forward, what is the next plan of action? Because it seems as if these objectives will not stop at anything to make sure that they truncate this process. They do not want to see it go through. But in the interest of all parties concerned and in the interest of the growth of the economy, the progress of the economy, it has to go through. So what is the next line of action?
We, like I said to you, and I'm not being trivial, I don't know who these objectors are. They have not shown me their names or their faces. And so, as far as we know, the process is continuing. The next step is we have sent information to the 23 people out of the 25 that we feel can go forward. They will respond, and on that basis, we will get a short list of people who we think are actually qualified to go forward. They will then have the opportunity to do what we call due diligence for 4 to 6 weeks. At the end of the due diligence phase, they will come back with their prices, their management teams, their plans for the bank, and on that basis, we will select 1, 2, 3, or 4 to forward to the central bank. Those are the next steps. Nothing has stopped that from happening, and nothing will stop it from happening.
So we've already done, the AMCON has already settled Enterprise Bank in terms of selling it off and the rest of it.
It is not settled. They are now finishing the due diligence phase, which we think they'll finish in the next week or two. Then we'll have firm prices, firm plans, we'll have management teams. We need to know who's going to run this bank.
It's almost a done deal. It's almost sealed.
Well, it's almost a done deal. That's correct.
Okay, so now the next bank after, eventually the selling off of Mainstreet Bank is Keystone Bank.
That's correct.
Which is supposed to be next year, according to what AMCON says.
That's correct.
So the process already has started to build up. How is AMCON going to ensure that, the same challenges that are being faced right now as regards Mainstreet Bank sale isn't going to happen to Keystone Bank?
I think you dignify it by calling it a challenge. It's not a challenge, it's a nuisance. But we feel that we owe a duty to the Nigerian public to educate them, to comfort them with the fact that this is being done properly. There is no preferred candidate. There is no agenda. We want to have the highest price with the minimum of disruption in terms of employment and the economy. That's AMCON'S objective. And we do not know who will emerge as the winner of Mainstreet Bank. We still don't know who is going to emerge as the winner of Enterprise Bank. So we want to assure the public that this is being done in the public interest and in the national interest. But what's happening, these newspaper articles and all this noise, for me, is just a nuisance and will not even slow down the process in any way.
Now, Mr. Chike Obi, to other issues now, what is the status of non-performing loans acquired by AMCON at the moment?
Non-performing loans was always going to be a challenge, because these are loans that have been non-performing for a long time. And the banks, as you know, have been trying to collect them. So nobody should expect magic from AMCON. We do not wave a magic wand. We currently have about 600 cases in the courts. We're a lawful body, and we do things in a lawful manner. Having said that, because I don't want people to think AMCON is going to come in, there are loans we've acquired from the NDIC that they've been trying to collect since 1994. That's in the public domain. These are challenging situations, but we are ahead of schedule. We have restructured or recovered over 50% of the loans we acquired. We have a staff of about 290 dealing with 13,000 loans. It's a very daunting task, but we're ahead of schedule. We will have rescheduled or recovered our loans in over a 5-year time frame, and we're very well advanced based on our projections. But nobody should, I heard all over the place that people are walking free. It's not true. We have contacted every debtor. We're pursuing every debtor. And believe me, no debtor in Nigeria of AMCON will walk away without having settled with AMCON. That I can promise you. But it will take time. And the alternative is to go build a big bureaucracy of 2,000 employees. And then when you've solved the problem, you have the problem of diminishing or reducing that bureaucracy. So it's better to approach it optimally, which is you have the minimum number of staff that can do the job. And that's where we are. And we wish we could do faster, but the cost of doing it faster will disrupt the economy, will overcrowd the courts, because we have to go through the courts, and will create a big bureaucracy that we'll have to dismantle 5 years from now.
Yeah, okay, 5 years now, because of course you know that there's been this issue of the extension of tenure for AMCON to continue, because it was supposed to have begun to wind down after 10 years.
No. There's no issue. The law does not have a timeline for AMCON. It's not in the law. We, the planners of this intervention, have put a 10-year timeline on it. That is a planning timeline. AMCON does not have a sunset date, so there's no case of extending AMCON legally. But we do recognize that this is a crisis, and this crisis, as we resolve it, we need to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And we think that at the end of 10 years, AMCON will be a very small entity with very few employees, cleaning up the back end of what is left. Okay,
so now that's a positive projection, at least what we should be seeing in the next couple of years to months, in the medium to long term, because of course, like Mr. Itomi said, post rebasing, the economy seems to be looking robust, but then we still have some other challenges that we're dealing with. And more than ever, we might still be needing AMCON to be around.
I hope we don't need AMCON to be around. And if AMCON is around and there's a crisis, we believe it will be a very small one, because I think a lot of things have been done by the Central Bank of Nigeria to catch any potential problems early. So I don't think you will ever see this kind of massive financial issue in Nigeria again. But so that's what we're hoping, and that's what we're planning for.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. But thank you so much, Mr. Chike Obi, for stopping by this morning and giving us a clearer perspective on what actually is going on as regards the sale of Mainstreet Bank Limited and what the shareholders are actually talking about and the way forward.
The objectors. Oh, yes. And I thank you, Harriet, for giving me the platform to explain myself today.
Well, thank you so much. Well, I've been speaking to the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of the Asset Management Company of Nigeria, Mr. Mustapha Chike Obi, and we've been taking a look at one of the most topical issues recently in the financial space, which is the planned sale of the Mainstreet Bank Limited. Of course, you heard his position. We've also gotten a legal aspect to it. It is a clear and cut case, and nobody should actually feel intimidated about expressing their interest in the purchase of this bank or any of the nationalized banks for that matter. But that's the program for today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm Harriet Agbenyi. Bye-bye.